Hey guys, Supersonic Theorist here, presenting you with Answering Your Questions, a series of short videos dedicated to answering your questions. And so, without further ado, answering your questions! RolePlayBot V2 asks, so, can you explain why in Sonic 1 there was only 6 Chaos Emeralds, then in Sonic 2 there was a 7th Emerald? Fantastic question, RolePlayBot. So, of course the obvious answer is that the creators hadn't thought of it yet. But that's the easy answer. We're here to see if we can find some kind of explanation within the canon to explain this phenomenon. So first, let me be clear. There are exactly 7 Chaos Emeralds. Not 6, not 10, and not 17. Just 7. There are little explanations here and there for why there seems to be more or less in certain games, but today we are only focusing on the reasoning behind there being only 6 in Sonic 1 for now. With that said, let's take a look at these two titles and do a side-by-side comparison to see if we can deduce which emerald is missing. So by comparing these two images, I found that the missing emerald is actually the purple gem. But hang on, isn't something a little off here? By comparing Sonic 2's set of Chaos Emeralds to other sets, you'll find that one of the gems is miscolored. That same purple gem that we figured was missing is actually supposed to be blue, which is actually present in the first Sonic game, meaning that the missing gem is actually the cyan one, which is featured in Sonic 2, but not in Sonic 1. But what does this all have to do with why an emerald is missing in the first Sonic game? Well, we should note that while Sonic 2 is a sequel to Sonic 1, it does not take place directly afterwards. There are a number of games that take place in between these two titles. Take into account Sonic 1 for the Game Gear. Some may see it as just a Game Gear alternative to the Genesis title, but there are a few small details that really help pull this theory together. The first is that this title takes place on South Island. This is important because Sonic is an island hopper, a thrill seeker constantly searching for the next big adventure. So he wouldn't be just constantly going back to South Island, so this adventure likely takes place at the end of another. Second, though, is the lifeless color of the usually colorful Chaos Emeralds. See, there's only one other occasion where we have seen the emeralds so lacking in spark, and that is when the emeralds have lost their power. I hypothesize that the emeralds must have lost a large amount of energy during the last instance that they were used, and hadn't yet fully recovered their power. The most recent instance would have been prior to Sonic 2, as Sonic has not yet learned the spin dash, and it also has to be on South Island, leaving only the first game. Sure, Sonic Chaos takes place on South Island too, but Sonic knows the spin dash in that game, so it can't be the most recent entry, and Sonic Pocket Adventure takes place much later, and Sonic 2 for the Game Gear is obvious about its place in the timeline. Thirdly, a new level is introduced in this game in the form of the Skybase Zone, a fleet of battleships not present in the previous title. Robotnik is clearly angry with the results of his most recent encounter with the Hedgehog, and wants to finish things by bringing out the big guns. Speaking of Skybase, I believe that this is the location of the last emerald. After all, Skybase wasn't in the last game, and the emerald can be found there. Since Sonic didn't have all 7 emeralds when he scattered them, they likely wouldn't have went all over the world, so it makes no sense why one would be here. Even when all 7 scattered together, they usually wound up around the same area, so why wouldn't this one just be on the island instead of on a random battleship? And you wouldn't have noticed this because the shade of blue is very close in color to cyan, creating the possibility that this is actually the 7th emerald. Now of course you might say that the last emerald could just be in the special zone, but the fact that you couldn't enter the special zone in the previous game proves that this isn't the case. The only time the player couldn't enter the special zone was when all of the emeralds were found, so it couldn't be there. You might say that you couldn't go there because Sonic canonically doesn't collect them all, but remember that classic Sonic games didn't force the true ending onto the player. Remember that the canon ending to Sonic CD is actually the bad ending, where Sonic doesn't destroy all the roboticizers in the past or collect all the time stones, as evidenced by Sonic 4 and Generations, both of which use the bad futures version of Stardust Speedway. But creating a good future is still possible in this game, so if the last emerald is in the special zone, then it should be possible for Sonic to collect it. Next, you might argue that when the emeralds lose their power, they turn black, not blue. But in this instance, the emerald would have lost most of their power, not all of it, so they wouldn't turn black. But they wouldn't have enough power to behave the way they normally do. And to add more fuel to the flame, in Sonic 2 for the Game Gear there are 6 emeralds once more, but this time it's the pink one that's missing, and the cyan emerald can be found, proving that it was the one that was missing in the previous game. And looking at it, you can see that it would be easy to be unable to distinguish it from the other emeralds in Sonic 1. So in short, the reason why one of the emeralds was missing in the first Sonic game was because Robotnik had it all along. I hope that answered your question, RolePlayBot, and look forward to more videos in the future.